Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Snapshot for episode 32. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined by none other than Marvel Snap phenom KM Best. KM, how was your week in Marvel Snap?
Didn't you say it was 33?
Did I say something else?
Yeah, you said 32.
Well, I mean, classic. Confirmed.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
maybe he said 33 and it's totally fine and I'm the one who's hallucinating here. All right, let's move on. My week in Marvel Snap was, tough, honestly. For those who are unaware, I lost my cat on Friday. It was about as graceful as it could have been, but it was still the kind of thing that, all week I sort of kind of knew was happening. And so it did definitely put a damper on my ability to enjoy the game for probably the first time ever. I was like, I just don't know if I have it in me, but I do really still enjoy, obviously streaming. It was very helpful to me to stream yesterday. I didn't know how I would take it, and my community was very nice to me, and I really appreciated that. And I also, did take some time to scour the tournaments, interview people, get a handle on things. I've probably watched more tournaments than anyone else in the last few days, and I do have a pretty decent handle on the meta, but it is quite wide open right now because everyone is experimenting after the patch, and it's a little hard to tell what's actually definitively good. That said, I think Darkhawk is still very, very strong. Mm-hmm. The move package is attacking Darkhawk by blanking Shang-Chi and Enchantress, so that is the major method of attack there. And the various Thanos decks are including Magneto as a way of taking that matchup and making it a positive, or Wave and Magneto, because when you play Wave into Magneto against a Darkhawk deck, it is very hard for them to beat you. There are some other decks as well that are threatening those mid-range decks by just going over the top of them in non-interactive ways. So, for example, a Shuri deck with armor in it. So you just go Armor, Shuri, Red Skull, Taskmaster. That they don't go that tall. Or, for example, the Moon Girl combo deck, which, just a bunch of She-Hulks and Hulks on the final turn of the game, maybe even going to a turn 7, making the Darkhawk even smaller, stuff like that. And, of course, there are the Nimrod combo decks, which are mostly non-interactive. You just go Shuri into Nimrod into, ba-boom, 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 a bunch of Nimrods. And that is hard to deal with for those decks as well.
Yeah, interesting. Do you still see a high prevalence in a card like Legion, maybe gatekeeping a lot of these combo decks, especially the Moon Girl combo decks?
I think the issue is, in order to beat mirrors, I've seen people dropping Legion for, say, Sarah, right? Sarah's better in the Darkhawk mirror if you can land her by a very significant margin. But Legion is what keeps things like the Moon Girl deck at bay, right? So there is a give and take there. Mm-hmm. There's also, I think, a lot less Magic decks, though, because people are getting less fanciful with Magic. Now that Legion is out, just sort of generally, people have not been playing, Living Tribunal Ramp or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's just not been around. There's too much Darkhawk counterplay in the meta just naturally for you to want to do it. And a good number of them are still running Legion. So it's just okay, that's tough. But I've seen people go back to Stature Black Bolt for a mirror edge, back to Sarah for a mirror edge. And that's a reasonable attempt to target mirrors. I think there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of my deck building is I should really do something about the mirror here. But generally, just generally, I still prefer Legion.
Mm. And how do you feel overall about the impact of the new seasonal card? Is it Dakin? I feel like it's
no one knows what it is, but it's provocative.
Yeah.
It gets the people going. It's Dakin. I don't care. I don't care if you want to write in about how I'm pronouncing this wrong. I don't care. I do not care. It's fine. Mm-hmm. Hey, it's all right. There's Surfer decks and there's discard decks, and of the two, if I really wanted to play him, it would be in the Surfer stuff.
Interesting.
But one of the major advantages that I feel Surfer decks have often had is they automatically blank Shang and Enchantress. They're just good at against decks with Shang and Enchantress that are reliant on Shang and Enchantress because of that. And Dakin means you no longer do that. Mm-hmm. So that is something to consider, in my humble opinion, that I'm not saying you can't play around it. You obviously can play around it. Just throw priority, do it on the final turn of the game. It's pretty good, but it is notable and worrying that something that used to happen just for free in deck building is now no longer free. You have to actually think about it.
Yeah, interesting, because this was one of the cards that was, prior to the card releasing, the season pass coming out, was very hyped up on Twitter. Not a super reliable source sometimes, but doesn't really have the impact.
I will note that I never once typed this card out.
Yeah.
You cannot go back through my thing and see like, the closest I came to hyping this up is I asked people which of them they thought would be the best.
Yeah, I wish I had names, but there was people that were like, this is Zabu, pre-nerf Zabu power level.
My best comp was Thor.
Yeah,
and I think that's about right. Still, honestly, where it's just like, this is a card that is above rate in the right decks, and frankly, my whole thing with him was I don't know how good he's going to be until he gets his support.
Exactly.
Silver Samurai, X23, the other stuff that is coming out this season should make him better, or at least has a chance on buffing the archetypes that he wants to go in, rather than just, of course, being splashed in the Surfer list.
Yeah, absolutely. The full season of supporting cards over the course of this month.
I will note one thing, though. The reason I think the discard and Surfer decks are the best Dakin decks is because everything else, like, there's only two ways to play Dakin. One, you play him as a 3/8. Two, you play him as like a 350 or whatever, right? If you are doing anything other than that, you are in the bad place. And that is I invested some resources in this and it dies to Shang-Chi place. Don't be in that place. Either play it where if they don't Shang-Chi you, they cannot win the game, or play it so it can't get Shang-Chi. Those are the rules of the card right now. Do not middle this. Do not make a 16 power Dakin and then be like, man. Like, don't do it.
Is Shang-Chi just in like every deck right now?
I mean, as he should be, considering what other people are trying to do, right? Like, people talk about how Shang-Chi could use a nerf. I don't really know how true that is, because, again, if it wasn't around, what would be happening is, here, by two ships passing in the night, my points are larger than your points. And it's like, okay, that's fun for like a week. That's fun for a week, and then we need to get back to like thinking.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's a healthy effect. The question when it comes to Shang-Chi is like, should it fit in the Zabu shell at the 4 cost, right?
Yeah, and that is, I think, like, honestly, if it were like a 3/0, would it be a better card? Oh no, because of Surfer. But like, if it were like a 5/7, like a really competitively costed 5 cost card.
Yeah,
I don't know. Even a 5/5,
maybe.
Like, it's much harder to fit in everything. And I think one of the things I would stress, though, is, do you remember when Arrow wasn't everything and then they got rid of it and Galactus showed up?
You mean the good old days?
It's one of those situations. It's one of those situations where it's like, you think that you hate this, but trust me, the thing that it's holding back is almost certainly more annoying.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. You think that you hate this, and you do. You have every right to, but whatever it's holding back is more annoying. I'm going to draw a nerd analogy here. It's the Lord Ruler from Mistborn, right? If you've never read that, it is he was the bad guy. The Mistborn spoilers, I guess. Turn this off if you don't want Mistborn spoilers.
Yeah, after they've already been spoiled, turn it off.
Shut up. Like, he's the bad guy, right? He's the bad guy in the first book, the most evil man, the evil guy ruling the country. And it turns out that what he was trying to do was, sort of misguidedly, but as effectively as he could, protect it from a larger threat. And that is Shang-Chi right now, where it's like, look, you think it sucks, but trust me, if you get rid of this card, it is going to suck way more. That is my read.
Yeah, a little nugget for all the Brandon Sanderson fans maybe listening. If I could have like a statement to describe the past week, actually, with the release of the season pass, for me, it's kind of been the rise of Silk, actually. Not that Silk is the most impactful card, but it's at least had a time in the spotlight, right? Resurged, right? It's in a lot of decks, people looking at it, evaluating it for what it is, which is quantitatively, it's a 2/5, and that's very powerful. 2/5 with minimal downside.
But that's not why it's being played.
So why is it being played?
Because it turns on Miles Morales and it moves your Kraven and Angela, right? Like that whole deck exists in the shadow of Darkhawk. It is a deck that is built in its entirety to blank tech cards. The idea is basically, okay, there's only 6 turns in the game. You see 9 cards. If we can turn 2 of those cards into not cards, that is a huge advantage. That is the entire point of the deck, which is, and one of the things that Darkhawk decks tend to be, and they're going to have to change this, and I think some of them already are, is threat light. There's just the big Darkhawk, and that's kind of it. And that is a problem that they have. Yeah. And so you end up in this situation where, like, okay, if you don't have Iron Lad, now you really can't play the deck because people are blanking your tech cards. And if they're blanking your tech cards, not having Iron Lad is your second Darkhawk some of the time. And like, that's really important now. Like, there's a point at which, Black Bolt stature ends up becoming more and more important because, again, it's just numbers. You need to be able to win games on numbers against decks that are blanking your tech, right? And the move deck, that's what it's built to do. It's not, Silk is a 2/5. Yeah, she's a 2/5. That's awesome. But the Kraven, the Angela, the potential Kitty Pryde, all that stuff, that's what matters. All those move decks are built to blank removal. That is the point. They're middling it, right? They want to be as big as you can get without ever getting above 8.
Yeah. Well, let's read out the list for people listening. And I believe, so correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, I believe this originated from Lambie series. So I'm looking at his Twitter to get it.
It's hard. Deck credit, first of all, deck credit is like horse shit.
It's who I got it from.
As I understand it, Lambie series popularized it, but I will say, I know for a fact Revis was playing basically this deck last season and had been banging the drum of it for a while, and we all kind of ignored him. Owl God, the Korean player, played something very, very similar. And I think, we all were just like, oh, that's cute. And then didn't really pay attention to it. In the Kawa Clash, I did play it a little bit. It was pretty good. But now that, things have changed since then, I think it has become a real threat, with the idea being just, let's blank all of these tech cards out of the Darkhawk deck. Let's make them beat us with stats, and we can actually, have Shang-Chi. And there's 2 real ways of doing that. The first is just what I would call the aggro list, which is the list I put on Twitter. It's 11 of 12 of what Lambie played. And it's basically just like, if you've never played this before, start here. You got some training wheels, Jeff, Nightcrawler. It's easy to understand. An extra 1-drop, so if you mess up your curve, you're good. And then there is the Owl God deck, which he was running Sunspot instead of Iceman. I opted for Iceman just on the grounds that I think it's a little underplayed right now. And one of the things that worries me with that list is, people who go Shuri into Nimrod. And if I can just find a card that disrupts that a little bit proactively at the 1-cost slot, as opposed to just like playing an armor or whatever, I think that's pretty useful for me.
Yeah.
But both of those decks are, I think, sort of like your intros to the archetype. They're pretty easy to play, and both of them are oriented specifically at beating Darkhawk, right? Specifically, and like they are heat-seeking missiles to beat Darkhawk. That is the point of them. They are built to just have an advantage in that matchup naturally, while also being a similar style of deck, which is to say, put a bunch of points on the board and play a Shang-Chi. Or put a bunch of points on the board and play an Enchantress. Like they're very similar decks.
Well,
but they're built to have an advantage in what you'd call the pseudo mirror. Whether or not they actually do have that advantage is kind of up in the air. But there are 2 main ways to attack Darkhawk. One is blanking their tech cards. The other is playing Magneto. And these decks are trying to do that.
Let me read off the aggro list that I got from Lambie. I think that's about as good as I can get in deck credit for me and Marvel Snap.
Yeah, that's where you got it.
I'm taking it from currently. So, Kitty Pryde, Angela, Kraven, Jeff, Silk, Hulkbuster, Spider-Man, Shang-Chi, Captain Marvel, Miles Morales, Spider-Man, Legion, America, Chavez. Is there any sort of nuance past what you already said that we need to talk about when it comes to piloting this list and being successful with it, or is it pretty straightforward in terms of point slam? I know
it's hard for me to know, because to me it's like, oh, this is pretty straightforward, but to you it might not be. So I guess not to you, Brendan, but like the general public it might not be. But to me, like, I think people like get caught up in like, oh, this is so complex. And it's like, really the only complexities here are planning for your Silk turns. She is genuinely very hard to play. Like, if you have priority, you can make sure where she isn't, basically, because wherever you play your last, or if you don't have priority, you can make sure where she isn't. If you do have priority, all bets are off. The main thing that she does, though, because a lot of what I noticed about the curve of this list is there's a lot of like ways to fit +1s in, right? So your turn 2 is a 2-drop, your turn 3 is a 2 plus a 1, right? Kitty, this is why Kitty is so very good in this list, because she fits in as a 1 a lot of the time, and she can constantly trigger Silk if you would like to trigger Silk, right? So that is one of the major things that this deck has going for it. I don't think you need Kitty to play these lists. You'll notice the Owl God version, which is like a little more mid-rangey, does not have her at all because it wants to play Magneto, because it wants to be able to Magneto all your Darkhawk stuff. And so like there is some concessions being made there. But basically there are some really, really interesting things happening with this list. And the main thing you need to understand is, you know, you want to get your Silk up and running as soon as possible. And then you want to be playing like X+1 a lot of the time. So like, for example, you play Craven, you play Silk into Nightcrawler, move the Nightcrawler over to the Craven lane, hopefully. Then you play something on there, plus you play like a 3 plus a 1 the next turn. That 1 then potentially being Miles Morales. Then your 5 ends up being like a 4 plus 1 if you didn't play the Miles on that turn. Like there's just a lot of, if you keep the Silk in rotation, you can keep your Miles at 1 basically. And then that gives you a lot of flexibility in how and when you deploy. You have to keep in mind that Captain Marvel will count that Kraven gets a buff with her. You have to keep in mind just a whole lot of different stuff in terms of your positioning at the end of games. Mm-hmm. You can end up with full lanes. And you don't necessarily always want to, because Captain Marvel moving is a very powerful thing you can get done. I think, honestly, the Captain Marvel buff was the biggest thing for this deck, where now suddenly, instead of this useless 5, it is a very strong 4. And I think that's why this deck really rose to prominence, because this package was around. Like I said, Revis was playing it. It was doing well. But Captain Marvel getting buffed in your deck that already runs Kraven, like it's just very difficult to play against unless you are putting an overpowering amount of points on the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the easiest low to the ground foundational heuristic of this deck is Miles Morales is not a 4/5, it's a 1/5. So you shouldn't be playing it on 4 or something like that. Cam, what are the targets for the Hulkbuster? Is there anything, or is there something specific?
I cut the Hulkbuster.
Yeah, because that's the card that sticks out to me. I'm like, okay.
I cut the Hulkbuster for Nightcrawler, but the idea with the Hulkbuster is it's supposed to go on Jeff, it's supposed to go on Kitty, and it's really good when it does that. And if you don't have those things, you just play it as a 3/5, but it's just like, one of the big pitches for this deck for me was we are immune to Shang-Chi, and a lot of the time you want to put Hulkbuster on things that are not immune to Shang-Chi anymore, and it's just like I got rid of that card. I will quote an unnamed very good player here who was just like, yeah, Hulkbuster is not a good card. That is where I ended up at with it as well, where it's just like, that is just not a very good card.
Look at the stats.
It's cool though. Like if you can hit it on Kitty, it's like the greatest thing on earth.
Yeah.
But if you hit it on basically anything else, you are suddenly very vulnerable to a card that you otherwise freely beat.
I mean, you can look at the other card in this list that has the same stats, Spider-Man, which has an immensely more powerful effect, just like across the board, right? Maybe not, when you hit the whole
Spider-Man's actually, honestly, I talked about Captain Marvel. Spider-Man's probably even a bigger reason why this deck is good now, because he is an instant guaranteed Miles proc whenever you need him. Mm-hmm. That's extremely powerful. Like that is, you do have to plan out like, okay, when am I actually going to play my Miles? Because a lot of times, like maybe your turn 4 wants to be a Captain Marvel instead, so your Spider-Man should actually go on turn 4 along with the 1-cost card. Then you go Captain Marvel Miles on 5. But like that guarantee, also he's just a ridiculous card, but the guarantee is even more ridiculous, because like obviously if you Spider-Man then win the Kraven flip, he's a 3/9, which is disgusting. You get the Miles discount for free. Like there's just a bunch of stuff that got buffed that made this deck really, really, really strong.
Yeah. And about the Legion, is Legion in most of these decks because it's controlling some of these combo decks, or just because the floor on Legion is just so powerful at a 5/8 body?
Both.
Yeah.
It's without it, you wouldn't have any location control. And, Fisk Tower is a thing. There are some locations that really screw you up. There are some locations that are really good for you. Like if you can turn everything into like a Strange Academy or a Kunlun or something, right? There's a lot of things that Legion can do that's very powerful for you. And generally just having it in your deck when you don't really have any other specific ideas is totally fine. There are plenty of good 5-cost cards you could put in there. Like, for example, the Owl God version plays, Black Bolt Stature, which is, again, like, it's just like, here's the most points we can possibly play for the least energy that doesn't get Shang-Chi, right? Like, that is the entire raison d'etre of these lists. Just, we're doing points and we're not getting teched on.
Let me read out the owl list. That's going to be Iceman, Craven, Jeff, Silk, Polaris, Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Enchantress, Miles Morales, Stature, Black Bolt, Magneto. First thing I want to ask you is just the dichotomy between the lists regarding the America Chavez versus the Magneto. Where do you sort of lean in terms of that top end? Do you like having the utility of the Magneto, or do you think the consistency of the America Chavez is necessary in a list like this?
Magneto's busted right now.
Yeah.
Like you can, I will not fault you for making either decision, but Magneto is like the best 6-cost card in the game right now. Like, oh my god. Just think about all the things you can do to a Darkhawk player with that card.
Moving everything, right?
Think about everything that every Darkhawk player is attempting to accomplish, and then think about how much you can ruin their lives by playing a Magneto on it. Like, it is very, very, very powerful.
Yeah, and we talked about this last week regarding the Darkhawk list, that it's, it is a very powerful list, but when you don't have that turn 3 rock slide, and then you also have the Darkhawk, it's like you have so many tech cards in your deck that when you're actually trying to compete on points, it can be such an underwhelming deck if you don't find the right pieces at the right time.
Where's the beef?
Yeah.
Where's the beef? Yeah, absolutely.
I had something else I was going to ask you regarding these lists. I mean, maybe we can just hit on some of the other ones you had.
I do want to say, for the record, Iceman was something I put in. He was running Sunspot there. I didn't get a lot out of Sunspot when I played, and I was just like, I want something that's good that I just don't like. If I play it late, I don't have to be like, oh man, I played this card late. Because a lot of the times you'll play a card like late, a 1-drop late, to get like an extra Silk proc or something like that. And I just don't want to be like, oh, I'm playing Sunspot on turn 5 for 0 points. Like that was one of the things that really stuck with me. I want to have something that I'm fine playing late, and I'm also fine playing early. And I was just like, okay, that's probably Iceman.
I remembered my question. It was that if this list beats Darkhawk so handily, what does it lose to that Darkhawk beats? Why would you still be playing the Darkhawk?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it actually beats Darkhawk very handily.
Okay.
It's built to. But like fundamentally, the power level of going Zabu, Rockslide, Iron Lad, Captain Marvel, or whatever is ridiculous. Like, just on a fundamental level, the amount of disruption and power that kind of deck can put out when it does its thing correctly is very, very, like, I think it's not necessarily, I don't think it's a good matchup for the Darkhawk deck, but I don't think it's anywhere close to unwinnable, despite how built to beat it is.
And for people listening, let's just go over the Darkhawk deck. The Darkhawk deck. Little Freudian slip. That you had posted on your Twitter, which is Korg, Spider-Ham, Zabu, Jeff, Rogue, Darkhawk, Shang-Chi, Captain Marvel, Rockslide, Iron Lad, Legion, America Chavez. So, yeah, like you said, if Darkhawk hits the curve, maybe it still is the best deck in the metagame. If you had to pick one to take to your next Gold Infinite Conquest run, I know it's not out yet, which one are you leaning towards right now? Which list do you favor?
I favor Darkhawk for familiarity purposes, and just because I'm used to playing that, and because I think that list of Darkhawk is just extremely cutting edge right now. In a few days, it probably won't be, but that list that you just listed out, it's Torakun's list. We've been working on it for a while, just like trying to figure out like what the actual optimal list is. I know Proude ended up somewhere close to that. We all sort of talk about this stuff. And I think that one just makes so much sense to me right now, both in terms of just having some actual beef in the list and in terms of just roguing mirrors. So one of the big ways that you can steal cubes is they turn to Zabu Snap, you rogue their Zabu. And it's not like awesome or whatever, because, you know, they already got their little turn 3 rock slide or whatever. But one of the things the Darkhawk decks are built around is having Zabu, so you can play 2 4-cost cards on the final turn of the game, and taking that away when they think they're at their strongest is very, very powerful. It can help break Zabu's stalemates, for example. If you both have Zabu, you get Rogue, you Rogue their Zabu, it's done, right?
Did you ever experiment with Super Scroll in that slot, the Rogue slot?
It's worse, I think, not just because it costs 4, but because it doesn't do the thing with Zabu that you want. It doesn't take their Zabu. It doesn't take their position of strength and convert it into a position of weakness.
Okay.
It just makes your position of strength more equal to theirs. But by that point, if you're not playing Zabu, Super Scroll is not going to catch you up.
Makes sense. And you have two Thanos lists posted here, one being Lockjaw Thanos. Do you want to talk about both of them, or is there one that you think is a bit more okay. Well, let's talk about both. Let's go with Lockjaw. I'll read it out first before. Let's go Lockjaw Thanos. Wasp, Spider-Ham, Lockjaw, Killmonger, Wave, Spider-Man. Man, they're really catching me up with these nowadays. Shang-Chi, Devil Dinosaur, Vision, Thanos, Magneto, Death.
So that is a list from the Human Spider. For those of you who are not familiar with the Human Spider, he is my oldest rival in Marvel Snap. Like, when I say my oldest rival, I mean, we were the only 2 people in high elo in the beta that could play each other. Like, on our server, it was literally just us. And the first season of the game, release season, I think, I finished rank like 615. He finished right behind me at rank like 500. That's just how it was back then. The first time I ran into him, this is actually like a ridiculous thing to say. The first time I ran into him, he beat me with an innovative Wong deck. And I know you're going to be like, what do you mean an innovative Wong deck? I mean, like, literally the basic Wong deck. It hadn't been invented yet. like this was when it was like revolutionary to go Ironheart into Wong into White Tiger into Odin. It was revolutionary to do that and call it like a competitive deck at the highest echelon, right? That was not a thing that we thought was actually good. He also was like one of the big reasons why Iceman took prominence over Korg was him. He was running Iceman as his one drop of choice in that list. It was like an early version of the Storm. Yeah. Like that was one of the first places Storm was good, was because you'd storm a lane, then Wong off it, then dump stuff on the Storm lane. Like, this is all stuff that sounds extremely basic and normal to you now because it is. Yeah. But it is that way because of this guy. Obviously
there was a one drop slot. So this is like pre Darkhawk. And people would play Korg as a one drop just to put a rock.
I was one of those people. I thought Korg was better.
Yeah. Man, that's archaic Marvel Snap at this point, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, man.
It is forever ago. Anyway, that is the Human Spider. He's also someone who deserves a ton of credit for the original Rise of Thanos. Not to like toot my own horn a lot, but a lot of the original Rise of Thanos happened in my Discord. Like, there was like a 5,000 post thread in like January about that list, right? And he was one of the people that put people onto it in there, for sure, without question. It was like way back in the day. So now it's a complete lack of surprise. He's playing Thanos Lockjaw again. He just likes playing it. And he finished second place in the Snap Battle Arena. And I actually have an interview with him going live on Monday on my YouTube channel for a further breakdown of the list from his perspective. He is a very talented player, and this list is pretty damn good.
Did he win the Newverse event for the Neon Cat, or whatever the hell it was?
Oh, I do think he has the Neon Challenge title. Either he has it, or he got messed up by like the way that ended with the 3-hour final day.
I think it was that.
I think he has it. It's one of those two.
No, Educated Collins got messed up. That was it. Yeah. He got messed up.
I know Tori has it. Yeah. Tori has it.
And there's people listening to this right now, and they're like, what Stone Age?
Don't
Marvel
even bother.
Snap
It's just beta stuff.
About?
Don't even bother. It's beta stuff. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So regarding this Lockjaw Thanos list, I mean, kind of similar to a list that was being played a couple weeks ago. That I think they're close to a list that you almost played in the Conqueror's event, right? Or did you actually end up playing Thanos Lockjaw in the Conqueror's
It's
event?
a little bit like the Desmond list, yeah, but really what it reminds me of is just the old Lockjaw Thanos lists. I'm a sucker for anything playing Wave at this point. I'm a big Wave believer, right? Honestly, a card I wish I could get in here was Odin. That is a card I really, really, really want to get in here because, you know how many decks are prepared for Wave Odin right now? It's basically 0. And Thanos is usually very good at getting ahead into Wave Odin because a lot of people are not playing Killmonger right now. You just like go bunch of stones, Wave Odin, you're dead. Like that is absolutely a thing that I'm interested in a list like this. But I understand why, for obvious reasons, the Magneto had to be the call.
Yeah,
because Darkhawk is still so prevalent, and this list is, it's a Lockjaw list, so you have to do something about the Darkhawk matchup if your Lockjaw is going to suck. So Wave Magneto, very good in that matchup.
Yeah, Wave seems so well positioned right now. All these decks are playing their discount decks with the Zabu, playing multiple cards of turn, or they're discounting via Black Bolt Stature. I mean, Wave is the classic counter to Black Bolt Stature, but also having the Miles Morales in that package. I mean, Wave just seems like one of the best cards you can be playing if you can justify.
I think she's good. I just haven't found anything that's really broken through for me with her. But obviously, I think she's awesome.
Yeah. You were saying something there. I kind of cut you off. Do you remember what that was?
I already forgot. Keep moving.
All right. So regarding this list, relative to the power level of these Darkhawk decks and these sort of like move-esque decks, do you find this deck to be like, is it good enough to queue up into these Darkhawk decks because you have things like the Magneto? Okay, so what are some... I know Thanos Lockjaw is sort of one of these decks that has been historically, harder to play, has a bit of a higher skill cap. Is there any tips you could give people maybe looking at it and looking to pick it up that they might not see first time looking at the 12 cards?
No, I think most of these are pretty well known, like Snap on Lockjaw Wasp, Snap on Early Mindstone. Be extra aggressive when your opponent's decks are not doing their thing. So, like, if they don't play a Zabu on turn 2, you could Snap. Like, as long as you're doing something kind of reasonable, if they're not playing a Zabu on turn 2, you are very, very able to try to Snap and bully them out of this, because if they're not playing a Zabu on turn 2, what that means is you're almost certainly going to be able to Magneto every card they play into one lane. Like, it is going to be all 3s and 4s for the rest of the game for them, for the most part, with maybe 1/5. Notable exception, Black Bolt Stature, actually pretty good against this list compared to, like, the other ones. But that is, you can very reasonably, like, if you have, like, Wave in your hand and they miss Zabu, you can Snap. Like, you could just be like, yeah, I'm going to get you here. By virtue of taking more game actions, playing Wave on 5, and then Magnetoing you. Yeah, unless your hand is absolutely unplayable, you can do stuff like that.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about the Thanos deck is the early snap equity, or at least that's what we sort of recognize at this time. I mean, it's just common. It's sort of a common strategy to, Mindstone Snap, Lockjaw, Wasp Snap. Like, these are some early snaps you can do with this deck because it does get so favored off of some of those hands. This other list you have here, another Thanos list, but no Lockjaw. It's Kraven, Jeff, Polaris, Spider-Man, Super Skrull, Shang-Chi, Stegron, Blue Marvel, Professor X, Vision, Thanos, Magneto.
This is OKJK's Thanos list. It won in the finals against THS's Thanos list. And what it looks like to me and what it plays like to me is just like a recognition. It's like, all right, what if we just put all the good cards into Thanos? What if we were just like, I'm going to put every good card into the Thanos deck and it's going to be fine? And you know what? It is fine. Hey, I saw a similar list from Owl God, who was also doing, I think it was like, his included like Thanos, Jean Grey, Negasonic, though. And yeah, I'm not really a Negasonic guy, but I do think that it is something that has like some real potential. Just a list where it's just like, all right, what if we just put all the best early threats and then some Thanos stuff into a Thanos deck? And it's just like, oh, that's probably good. Like, this is one of the advantages this has, interestingly, against other Thanos decks is, having your own Kraven into like move decks is a very powerful thing to have. It's like almost a deterrent to the move deck that is running around right now, because you also get those buffs. And I think at this point, it just should be recognized just how powerful Spider-Man is. One thing that I think people might not really be into is the Stegron. And I do think he's probably replaceable, but He's just good a lot of the time. With Spider-Man and Stegron, you have a shocking amount of control and ability to attempt to clog your opponent, right? And if you can clog your opponent by putting all their early plays in your Kraven lane and buffing your Kraven while you do that, that is a very, very powerful thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some really standout cards for me in these lists that, in the context of the meta, the things like the Magneto, like the Wave, and even like the Kraven, right? You're playing a 2/2, but getting additional value from many. If a lot of your opponents you're facing are playing this sort of pseudo move package, it is quite a deterrent, like you said. And then of course, you have the Jeff, the Stegron, etc. Have you had a chance to experiment and play this list sort of in Conquest yourself?
I have only played it a little bit. I would not call myself an expert on it. I just think it has proven by winning the tournament and in the little bit I have played with it that this is something you may or may not see on ladder, but it's definitely something that deserves some investigation.
Yeah,
I think it's quite strong.
This list is super interesting to me. This is out of all of them, this is one of the ones where it's like, I don't think I would have ever come up with this, like this, especially this early package in the context of like a sort of top end Thanos shell that we're used to, right? Like Blue Marvel, Professor X, Vision, Thanos, Magneto with the Shang-Chi, like in Spider-Man. That's very usual, but these other cards are very, very interesting, for sure. Kim, anything else you want to round out sort of the meta analysis with? I know.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to talk about like there's just a bunch of stuff that like we haven't talked about. And we probably won't. Surfer and Discard are fine if you want to play them. I want to talk about Shuri decks.
Okay.
So right now there are a couple major Shuri decks. Obviously, normal Shuri Red Skull. I will say, I think if you are going to play Shuri Red Skull, you need to be playing like with Sunspot and She-Hulk right now, I think. Because without the ability, like one of the big things that the Kitty Red Skull deck did was bring back your flexibility in terms of where you deployed your points on the final turn of the game and your non-reliance on Shang-Chi. So on non-reliance on stuff that gets Shang-Chi, right? So right now, every Red Skull deck seems to be built such that it's just like, oh, well, I am going to play the card Shang-Chi and you are going to die. Unless you got specifically like armor into Sauron, into Shuri, into Red Skull, into Taskmaster. You're going to be playing an unprotected Red Skull at some point. And frankly, I think at this point, you are like, you can't do that. You can't do it. Mm-hmm. So I think that if you are going to play those Shuri decks, you should be including Sunspot, She-Hulk, just so you have some way of dealing with Shang-Chi decks with perhaps an 18-power She-Hulk and a 18-power Taskmaster on the final turn of the game. In addition, the Shuri Nimrod decks are also just really strong, right? Like you notice all these mid-range decks, basically none of them are playing Cosmo, basically none of them are playing Armor, and they're all playing Shang-Chi, and like obviously you can't Shang-Chi and Nimrod. There are some interactions that these decks do have, like I've Spider-Man a Nimrod before, right? Like I have done stuff like that, right? You can mess up things in that way, but it's not the most common thing that you can get done. And so I do think like, until people start really threatening them, like those decks aren't very good, but they are some of the only bad matchups for these mid-range decks. And also one thing that I saw was a really fun list that just jammed the Nimrod stuff and the Shuri stuff in the same deck. It was just like, all right, look, this is, we're doing Nimrod, we're doing Shuri, we're doing Phoenix Force. One of these combos is going to work, right? Like one of these combos is going to be a thing. And I thought that was just a very fun little way to deck build. So I would be interested in investigating that too. Because right now, the things that work well against these decks are just things that go over the top as hard as possible without getting Shang-Chi. Mm-hmm. So if you can set up something like Nimrod, or if you can set up something like an 8-power Phoenix Force, or not an 8-power Phoenix Force, like an 8-power multiple man or whatever. Or if you can put an armor on the board and then have Phoenix Force revive a Human Torch, move the Human Torch to the armor lane kind of thing. Like if you can find ways to play around getting your shit rocked by Shang-Chi is basically the pitch here.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, one card you mentioned there, Cosmo is just one of those cards that has really fallen off in terms of meta representation. I just remember a month or 2 months ago, it was discussed as like one of the most oppressive cards in the game, in which case it probably was in the context of the card pool. But it's
just like the issue that the thing has is Cosmo used to be there wasn't a deck punishing decks for running Cosmo because the decks that ran Cosmo used to be able to afford it by putting a ton of points on the board, right? Like you could put it in your Darkhawk deck and it'd be fine because like you're Darkhawking them, you're still putting a shitload of points there. But now the mid-range decks, the move stuff is punishing you from the ground up, I would say. It's saying you might not have enough points and you might have a bunch of blank cards, which means you probably can't run this blank card against me. That said, you could replace America Chavez with Cosmo in the Darkhawk list. I would be totally fine with that. I actually had it like that for up and like in the video that I did. I had it like that, and then I was like, no, we should put Chavez in there.
There's one more deck I want to talk about. Again from Lambie series. Man, that deck came so much during this podcast. But called it Schmoove Hawk, just a Darkhawk deck with a little bit of
no. I've talked about this one.
Go for it. What did you say? Garbage or
not garbage? Just like if you're gonna play this, play the move deck.
Okay. Well, let's use it for context then. So even if you're not going to play this list, I'm going to read this list out. We're going to use it for context. You're going to talk about why this list is not effective. So Kitty Pryde Core.
It's not effective. It's totally fine. It's good. Like it what it is though is it's just points. That's the issue.
Well, there's a Shang-Chi in there and a Legion.
But if you have the Shang-Chi and the Legion, what makes it better than the move deck? Because it also has those cards.
Yeah, so it just gets the move deck is blanking the Shang-Chi. So now you have a dead card in there.
And suddenly, and you're not because you're a Darkhawk deck, right? Like that's the like I'm not even 100% sure that I buy that it's a better version of the Darkhawk list, because one of the things I really like in the Darkhawk list is holy shit, I like Spider-Ham right now. Like it just gives you outs to so much garbage. Like that you just otherwise would be unable to deal with. I actually feel sad about losing Spider-Ham. So this list, I think, is if you wanted your Darkhawk deck to be better into the move deck, you could do this. But I'm not sure how necessary it is to do that.
Yeah, I picked this one out because the opening line here is the better way to play Zabu Hawk, period. Big claims. But just so people have context for the list, it's Kitty Pryde, Korg, Angela, Zabu, Jeff, Silk, Darkhawk, Shang-Chi, Miles Morales, Rockslide, Legion, America Chavez. And for the reasons you said, maybe not the
it feels like it's middling it, basically.
Yeah, and that can happen, right? It's like you try to just be both decks at the same time, and you're not you're the jack of all trades, but the master of none, I guess. Where
like right now, what Darkhawk has over the move deck is it has game against weird bullshit. Right? It has Spider-Ham. It has Enchantress. It has game against weird stuff. It is still policing the meta. And what this is saying, all right, what if we stopped trying to police the meta and started trying to beat the mid-range mirrors? And I think it is a very effective method of doing that. But I don't know that you would ever play this if you could just play the move deck. Like this feels like taking I don't know. I feel like I would rather play either the move deck or the Darkhawk deck than this because they're filling different roles.
What are some of the key hits of Spider-Man in this meta? Is it things like that Magneto, the opposing Magneto, hitting that and preventing them?
Spider-Ham? Yeah, hitting Magneto is obviously incredible because there are a lot of decks relying on Magneto right now, but like hitting Sarah in Sarah decks, hitting the Living Tribunal if people are trying to scam you there, right? Like there's just a bunch of stuff that you randomly gain a ton of percentage against. Hitting Null versus Destroy decks or Death versus Destroy decks, right? Like there's just a bunch of stuff that it does. It covers you in ways that no other card can, right? It is a card that just absolutely covers you against anything you didn't plan for. And I think that's the upside of, like, if you were to play a Darkhawk list, the reason you would play it is because you are prepared for everything. That is what you do. Granted, you are not prepared for Nimrod Shuri. You are totally unprepared for that. But like you are prepared for most things you're going to see. And I think with this list, I actually talked with Lambie about it, and I am fairly certain he will agree with what I say, which is if you're going to play this, just play the move list. Like, if you're going to, like, this is the Darkhawk list attempting to adapt to move mirrors, right? To all those move decks trying to go under it. It's attempting to adapt to that. It's getting sleeker and more aiming for points and cutting the Enchantress because the Enchantress doesn't do anything in those matchups. And so it's smart deck building. But I think he'd agree with me. Just play the move list if you're going to play this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Kim, I want to actually get this podcast under an hour for the first time ever in the Snapshot
The first time ever.
But in order to do that, we're going to have to talk about the rest of the cards that are coming out this month in the context of Dakin, so we're going to speed through it. All right. First one, Lady Deathstrike. 5/3 on reveal. Destroy each card here with less power than this. What are your thoughts?
There's Dracula counterplay finally.
Finally. Oh my God. That's actually
People have been
nice.
yelling about, oh, there's no counterplay to Dracula for forever. Now there's Dracula counterplay. I think that's pretty cool. I also think that, I wish she wasn't a 5/3, but for obvious reasons, she probably couldn't be a 4 anything.
Yeah.
Like, I like this card a lot. I don't know if it's going to be good, but it's at least cool enough for me to want to try for sure. Like, I am generally of the opinion that destroying your opponent's cards is extremely powerful and an underrated effect, right?
Yeah.
So
can we Shuri this?
Yeah, you probably don't Shuri it. It's better to just like forge it.
Yeah, I was thinking about Forge, but then I'm like, okay, turn 4 Forge. What else are we playing on turn 4 with the Forge? It's
you go like I don't know, like turn 4 Forge. You wouldn't necessarily be like that's that good, but like what if you I don't know. I don't hate this. I think it's just killing a lot of stuff. If you can get it up to 5, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm kind of into that. Like you go like turn 4, you play Jeff Forge. Just blow up like half a lane. Seems pretty good to me. Because like most getting it to 7 feels like the real break point.
Honestly, I think it's
7.
6. I think it's 6. There's so many 4/5s in the meta, right? Like if this was destroy each card here with less power or less or equal power to this, it would be so good because all these cards are 4/5s nowadays. I feel like. Yeah,
like there's a bunch of 4/5s. There's a bunch of, but like here's the thing: like you look at cards like Angela, you look at cards like Bishop, you look at cards like Craven. These are cards that start small and get bigger, and by the time this card comes down, they might not be big enough to live. And that is an interesting thing for me, for sure.
For sure. Do you think it helps Dakin at all? Somehow playing it into the Mirror Monster Shard, or
don't think so, because like I said, I don't think Dakin. I guess playing it into the Mirror Monster Shard is pretty cool, right? Like, I don't think Dakin. Here's a question for you: When does it check the power? So if you played a Nova really early, like if your first card in the lane was a Nova, and then the Nova goes off and Lady Deathstrike goes to 4 power, are the rest of them checking for 4 or for 3?
I assume it would check for 4.
So that's pretty interesting, right? Because like that's one way to get it to 6. You go play a Nova in the lane, you go Forge, and then suddenly you play it at 5, the Nova pops, it goes to 6, you check it at 6. If that's how that works, that's interesting, right? Like there's some like mechanical stuff that I don't really know about here. But I don't think this card is going to be a staple. I don't think this card is going to be like overwhelmingly powerful, but that's mostly because I think they are being very careful with its power level, because this is not the kind of card that they would want to be everywhere.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this would be a pretty toxic effect, to be honest. Yeah. But I'm thinking more like, okay, turn 3 Spider-Man, right? Which is not ideal to play Spider-Man, but you're forcing your opponent to play into 2 lanes. Maybe one of the other lanes is unfavorable location. Then you play Shuri. I mean, the thing is, like, if you go Shuri, Lady Deathstrike, if that's even remotely a meta deck, it's going to be, no one's going to play in there after they see the Shuri, right? They're just going to avoid that lane, which is the problem. But I feel like Shuri this.
You put it in the same deck as the Nimrod, right?
Yeah.
It's your Nimrod mix up. Because you go like Shuri Nimrod or Shuri Lady Deathstrike.
I don't know. It's definitely cute.
I do agree.
It's a cute card.
I do agree it'll be toxic if it's good.
Yeah.
Right. Really tough to deal with if it's good.
X23, a 1-drop. So it's a 1/2 and says when this is discarded or destroyed, regenerate it at a random location and you get +1 energy next turn. What are your thoughts?
I think this card seems quite powerful.
Yeah.
Like just having one of the reasons I enjoyed Deadpool, even though he's not a very good card, is just there's some payoff here, right? You get some payoff for using your destroy cards on curve. And X23 is that on steroids. I honestly wonder how she'll impact deck building, though, because I don't really know how to build a deck with the expectation that I will have extra energy. And also the expectation that what if I don't, right? It's a very awkward situation. I do think that the first few decks I build with her are all going to use America Chavez, because if she's good, it'll be a Kitty Pryde level of good, where it's just like playing her on turn 1 is like the most broken thing you could ever do.
Yeah.
But like, imagine using this to power out early Lady Death Strikes, early Nimrods, early, like that stuff's really strong, right? Like that is just unbelievably powerful. Imagine using it to power out early Galactus.
I know, this looks disgusting.
Like there's a lot.
And
there's a lot of stuff.
You could get, like, the thing is like this gets regenerated. I'm assuming when it's regenerated, it's the same text. I mean, there's no reason why it wouldn't be. So you could get like 2-3 energy off this in a single game of Marvel Snap. And that's not even that crazy, right? Like this card looks absolutely disgusting. I don't know. It
does.
Because you could, let's go normal ass destroy deck or something like that, right? So we go turn 2 carnage, boom, we're up to 4 energy, or we go.
Yep, and then you play like a Venom or whatever, you're up to 6.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's just like, oh, that's really good. The issue is how are you gonna have cards in your hand?
Okay, so
that's the main thing you come up with is like, all right, how do you have cards in your hand? Because one of the things with the destroy decks is they do consume their own resources pretty heavily. They tax themselves pretty heavily, right? So like, how are you going to have cards in your hand to actually use this energy? Are you building to purely high roll and just win every game you draw X23 on 1? Are you building to just use it as a piece of your deck? Does it just go in Thanos or whatever?
Yeah,
because there's a bunch of stuff.
It's good enough, even if it's like pseudo time stone, right? If you're able to go like turn 4, let's say we're just consistently destroying us on turn 4, we go 6-drop, 6-drop. I mean, that itself is just very, very powerful. The fact that you can maybe do this on turn 2, you can blow it up, and then you also blow it up in turn 4, so you go 6-drop, 6-drop. This seems like a good card. I'm very interested in this card, actually.
I would agree.
Next up, Silver Samurai, 4/5. On reveal, each player discards the lowest power card in their hand. I mean, this
is an obvious Dakin synergy piece, right?
Yes.
Where that one is almost always going to be the lowest power card in your hand. But I think a lot of the rest of the power of this card is going to be a little bit more contextual, right? Like, is playing this into Black Bolt just like really good? Is going like Dakin, Silver Samurai, Black Bolt, just like ripping your opponent's hand apart?
Disgusting.
Is that?
Yeah.
Like, what if you went like, okay, hear me out. Spider-Ham, Dakin, Silver Samurai, Black Bolt.
Oh my God.
That's just a lot of strong stuff, right? Like there's a lot of like just whoa, I can't do
How
anything
do you beat that
anymore.
Curve, Cam? You have like no usable cards in hand.
You would be playing a discard deck.
Yeah, that also seems like pretty good, because you could also have Swarm in your hand as well. I mean, I don't know. The first time I saw this card, of course.
I don't think Swarm is ever going to be pitched by this.
Yeah,
like 3 is too high. Dakin with the one
power,
that it creates.
I thought lowest cost. I read it wrong.
No, lowest power is like a very specific thing, and I think this is the card that I think goes with Dakin the most because of that, right? Because having something that you actively want to pitch is critical for cards like this. If you don't have something that you actively want to pitch, this is going to hurt you a lot more than it's going to hurt them, right?
Yeah.
So like having X23, having the Muramasa shard, right? That is the kind of thing, like this is the kind of deck that could evolve out of this. It's just like, obviously it could just go in the Zabu Darkhawk shell. It might, for all I know.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that would be like, you go back to the Black Bolt stuff, you go Zabu Hawk, and you just discard all their cards. And if that's good enough, they die, right? You have Spider Ham for their highest power card, or Spider Ham for their highest cost card, Black Bolt for their lowest cost card, and then you have Silver Samurai for their lowest power card. Like that is a lot of hand attack, and I'm a little surprised this card came out the way that it did.
Yeah, I mean, this card looks. I mean, we talk about X23 maybe being toxic, or Deathstrike maybe being toxic. This card, I mean, this with Darkhawk, like
this
if
is
you
like
play
the kind
against
of
Black
toxic that's playable.
Yeah, if you play against Black, I feel like. If you play against Black Bolt and you even discarding the single card, it's like, it already feels like a lot. Now it's like 2 cards consistently. The opponent's discarding their Muramasa shard or some 1-drop that they didn't end up playing or they drew late. It doesn't really matter. And you're maybe losing a playable card. It's like, oh my God. It's looks really good. Looks really good. So the TLDR on these is just X23 and Silver Samurai. Those are the ones we're really looking out for, right? Yeah. I mean, these 2 cards coming later in the month, or I'm not sure if I had these in order, to be honest. They're much more exciting to me than Dakin is. the seasonal
I'll
card.
tell you what I'm worried about is that Twitch Rivals is on the 23rd.
Oh man, I would love
day 2 of X23.
Love to see it. I would love to see a degenerate. That's way
I'm
more
in
fun.
it.
Yeah,
I'm in it, right?
Yeah. That's way more fun though, is to see a super degenerate meta.
Get working, Brendan. Break this for me. Break these cards for me. All right. I'm gonna need the help.
Yeah, that's exciting. What's the format of Twitch Rivals this go around?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say.
Oh, okay, yeah. I
honestly, I don't know if I am. I have no idea.
Yeah. Don't. I'm not trying to push it. I'm kind of ignorant on some of that stuff. So I was just like, well, I hope it's hope you're playing against other streamers, not a speed run, because I want to see all my friends play against each other. That would be super fun.
Yep.
But man, X23 day 2 meta, Twitch Rivals, big things on the line, and it's just this freaking super degenerate meta. That would be super fun to watch. I think they timed it perfectly. All right, Cam, anything to wrap up with before we close out for the week?
No, I'm good. I have talked aplenty.
All right, well, boom, 55 minutes, 43 seconds. We are professionals. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you enjoy listening to us and you want to help us out, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or ratethispodcast.com/snapshot. I forgot to pick one out and read one this week, but we did get some very nice ones, and I'll make sure to get it in next week's episode. There's a video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/@the_snapshot. Like and subscribe while you're there. I know a lot of people look at, they listen to the episodes, they watch the videos, and they're like, why do you guys not advertise this? Why are there so little subscribers? Well, I got good news for you. You can help us out. Share it to your friends. Hit like and subscribe and help us get big. Twitter, Brendan APG, Cam Best, MS. Cam, your Twitch schedule, sir.
If you turn on twitch.tv at like 6 p.m. most days, I will be playing Marvel Snap. That's Eastern time. So usually I go from 6 p.m. to about 10 p.m. Eastern. And I hope you enjoy it. I have a blast playing. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.